let's go right to President Obama's speech last night, addressing Oval Office, 8 p.m. Sunday, prime time. What was your reaction, sir?
Well, I think he said a lot of nice things. Now, the question is, what's he really going to do? He should have been giving speeches like this some time ago. As you know, I agree with Tim Kaine, and the president has now, called on Congress to come out with a authorization of the use of military force, which is similar to, not exactly like a declaration of war, but similar to it. I have felt that we needed to do that for some time, and gave authority on Friday or Thursday of last week that my name be added to a letter going to leadership saying, look, we need to do this before we leave town at Christmas. And I still believe that. And I think the president was right on that. In regard to gun control, I don't agree with him. Certainly foreign nationals is a little bit different than U.S. citizens. But one of the things that Hillary, my wife, and I had a discussion after the president's speech last night about was the no-fly list. And there's several problems with the no-fly list. How does your name get on there? Well, somebody decides to put it on there. And what is as a U.S. citizen, don't care about foreign nationals, but as a U.S. citizen, what are your rights then to challenge that or to ask that you at least have a hearing with the judge to make a determination as to whether or not that was an arbitrary and capricious decision? I don't think there is a process, and that worries me. Certainly we want folks who are known terrorists not to be on there, but I was listening to a clip earlier that there was a congressional investigation. I have not read the report, but apparently Homeland Security has a number of people who are on the terrorist no-fly list. So, the list is loosey-goosey, and we shouldn't be taking away constitutional rights based on that list.
Well,
Foreign nationals not concerned about. U.S. citizens, I am.
Well, that's what Senator Rubio's argument, Marco Rubio's argument is that there were several 100,000 U.S. citizens on the no-fly list, and he said that he gets calls to his office from people trying to get off it. And he says it's a big hassle, and you can get on for all kinds of reasons. They mistake your name for someone else, or a neighbor, or you showed up somewhere for questioning, etc. But it would seem to me that what is the process for that? I mean, if I went tomorrow to get on an airplane and I'm told, sorry, you can't fly, you're on this no-fly list, which means I can't get on an airplane in the United States, that would hinder my ability to work and everything else. What would happen? What?
Well, as I understand it, now my office has not done one of these. That does a lot of times go to the senators' offices, but as I understand it, you then have to start working through the process and establishing to the bureaucracy that you aren't the person that they thought you were, or that they've got your identity mistaken, et cetera. You're certainly not going to be able to get on a flight that day or anytime soon. But there are some ways to work through the bureaucracy to try to identify who you are. There's as I understand it, no formal process where you can go to the U.S. district judge and establish that, that's not me. And so if somebody says, nah, we're not satisfied, you really don't have much recourse. And so I don't believe you should take away from a U.S. citizen a constitutionally guaranteed right without some kind of a formal process where you can go in and say, wait a minute, this isn't right. And without that, I'd feel very uncomfortable with that. And again, the list, if we're going to use it for those kinds of things, needs to be straightened out so we don't have employees working at the Homeland Security Department who somehow got on the list.
Well, it's saying right now that there are 73 employees paid by the Department of Homeland Security that are on the no-fly list zone. So that that whole thing doesn't square to the average person either. We're with Congressman Morgan Griffith, Republican, 9th District of Virginia. Congressman, Obama's speech last night, as you said, it was nice, I suppose, but he really didn't change his strategy. We're not being particularly successful with what we're doing. In your view, and of those in the Freedom Caucus in the House, what is your answer to ISIS?
Well, and I can't speak for the Freedom Caucus. I do think that we need to be more aggressive with ISIS. The whole fact that we would not until recently even target the oil trucks, which is where they're getting a substantial portion of their money, is absolutely ridiculous. We ought to be doing exactly what the British did the first day they got in. We ought to be bombing the oil wells, in my opinion. We ought to be working with the allies in the area. We have not treated the Egyptians very well. They're fighting ISIS at home. And because we have not been as supportive, they're now looking at other countries to get some of the military supplies that they need. And I believe they would be willing to help us in Syria if they thought that we were serious. If they thought our president was serious about dealing with that situation, I think the Egyptians might be willing to help. But all indications that I have gotten are is that this president has, basically stiff-armed the current regime government in Egypt. And it may not be the greatest government in the world, but they are fighting ISIS both in the Sinai and keeping an eye on ISIS in Libya. So, it's not like they aren't in the game. So I think we need to shore up our allies in the region, and let's eliminate this snake. There'll be others, but let's get rid of this snake as quickly as we can.
Congressman, what about Russia? Now, they're also battling ISIS, right? They just had a jetliner shot down. Why wouldn't they be our ally in this war?
Well, I think in the short term they can be. Long term, they want to increase their influence in the Middle East. They're doing it because of the president's lack of a strong policy there. But our interests are different in the long term. But sometimes you have to look at the short term, and we need to eliminate ISIS and make it clear that if you're going to start exporting terror around the world, that the world, Russia, the United States, France, Britain, etc., are going to come in and put an end to you very quickly.
Virginia, Congressman, about 2 weeks ago, you were the head of an effort, a letter, if you will, to House Appropriations Committee Chairman Hal Rogers, signed by 110 of your colleagues, expressing your opposition to President Obama's what you called unilateral pledge of U.S. taxpayer dollars to the United Nations Green Climate Fund. What the heck is that?
Well, it's a fund that the UN and the President have come up with to assist nations of the world in dealing with climate change. And so what they're going to do is they're going to pay these nations to enact policies or laws, regulations that will reduce their carbon footprint. One, the UN, of course, expects the United States to pony up a significant portion of the money. The President pledged a fair amount of money already. The fund is supposed to have $100 billion in it in the next few years, and the head of that particular program at the UN said the amount of money is peanuts. So we're expected to pay up a whole bunch of money to go out and in essence, help our competitors who are trying to take our jobs clean up their act a little bit. I don't understand it. Even if you buy into the whole climate change thing, we need to take care of our own country. We've got electric rates that are going up because of the policies here. We've got jobs that have been lost, and while we're creating new jobs now, the economy is starting to get percolating. It's not replacing jobs like the $75,000 a year coal mine jobs that I've been losing in my district every month for the last couple of years. And it is something we need to take a look at what we need to do in this country instead of pledging more money that we don't have, that we're borrowing from our children and grandchildren to give to other nations. And the best case scenario is we're helping them compete. And, of course, in some of those countries, the money will never find its way into climate programs or to making their factories less polluting because they have a tradition in many countries in the world of bureaucrats and government officials ending up with the lion's share of the money in their pocket.
Corruption, no doubt about it. I think Congressman, you hit the nail on the head. Half that money isn't going to end up doing anything but lining the pockets of someone else. Now, how does the president get to spend this money without explicit approval by the Congress?
Well, that's a great question. The president just hadn't seemed to care too much about the Constitution or the authority granted therein to Congress, and that's part of the debate. And that's why I think that we may very well be successful in getting our budget at least to the president's desk without that money in it, because I think appropriators in both the House and the Senate recognize that he's doing this unilaterally without congressional authority, and we need to put a stop to it.
Congressman, do you think yourself and some of your colleagues are going to be willing to defund the Syrian refugee relocation program if indeed Obama vetoes it and it's not overridden in the Senate, which it isn't going to be? You can't get 2/3 in there. So the only way to stop the continual influx of Syrian refugees is to simply cut the money off, because right now it's $65,000 each. Are you guys, do you think, willing to take that step?
Well, what I'm hoping that will happen is that we'll get our budget to the president's desk. I recognize he will probably veto it. That will start a negotiation process, which has not happened in the 5 years that I've served in Congress, where the president will have to give some. And if he will give us the language that we passed about a week or so ago, indicating that, if you properly vet these folks, then they can come in, but you've got to have, Homeland Security and the FBI saying these folks are okay, and certifying that they, no system's perfect, but certifying that they've gone through all the traps. That will slow the program down, and that's one of the reasons the president doesn't like that language, because they can't do that at the rate of 10,000 people next year. They might get another 1,000 in under that system, but we want them to make sure they're checked out. If he will do that, then probably the money can be there. Otherwise, I think that at least in the House, Senate's another story, but at least in the House, we're willing to fight that battle.
What is this president's sense of urgency to take these Syrian refugees in when the average person, Congressman, looks at the whole thing and says, why not just wait on this until we figure it out, especially after what just happened in San Bernardino? What is his haste here? And I have a minute. We have a minute.
Okay. Bottom line is the president always likes to get his way, and I think this is more about getting his way than sound policy.
That's going to be the final word. We want to thank Congressman Morgan Griffith for being with us, Republican, 9th District. That's in Southwest Virginia. Want more info? Go to griffith.house.gov, and we will be seeing Congressman Griffith this weekend at the Republican Advance in Hot Springs at the Homestead, sir. Look forward to having you on again on Friday when we're at the Homestead Live. Thank you.
Well, I will see you there. Bye-bye.
All right. Congressman Morgan Griffith basically saying that the only way you're going to stop the Syrian refugee influx is by defunding the program, and hopefully they can do that in the budget renegotiation after the president vetoes.